Okay, good morning. Today is Sunday. It is the 13th day of Kislev. Tonight, the 14th day of Kislev, is the Rebbe's wedding anniversary. Very special day. The Rebbe said that this is the day that connected me and you. It is this week we're completing the Tanya, finishing the book of Tanya. So we're very excited. And this Tanya, daily Tanya share. Also, we will add in the description at the bottom in the YouTube video, we'll add also links to the other daily studies, the Chumash, that we learn the daily Chumash and the daily the Tehillim and the daily Rambam, Maimonides. So if anyone wants to continue and have the complete Chitas and the Rambam the way the Rebbe instructed, you will be able to have it. You can click the link to the video and listen to these wonderful, wonderful classes. So in today's Tanya Shir, now the Rebbe continues in a way what he was discussing in the previous chapter, and that is that what happens when you study the Torah or when you do the mitzvahs. There are two things that happen. One thing that happens is you elevate the sparks. What does it mean? There's godly sparks that are in the physical world. They're scattered in the physical world, a lot of godly sparks that we need to elevate. And that means that when a person comes in a situation that does a mitzvah, he takes a physical object, and you do the mitzvah with a physical object, you are elevating the godly spark that is in the object. The other thing that is happening when you do the mitzvah is you draw down godliness into this world. You draw down more godliness when you study Torah or when you do the mitzvah. So in addition to elevating the godly sparks, you also bring down more godliness into this world. And in all of the worlds, the godliness becomes more intense. Now, what happens when a person does a negative mitzvah, meaning that he abstains from doing something bad? He has a chance to eat something not kosher and says, no, I'm not doing it. So the energy of the negative urge has also godly sparks, and by not doing it, it is elevating the sparks that energizes that urge. So this is how you elevate and purify godliness, even by abstaining from doing something which is forbidden. However, the question is, what happens with mitzvahs that sometimes you have mitzvahs that they're not realistic at all. They're not kind of mitzvahs that ever come to an opportunity to do them. You don't even have an urge to do them. And he gave an example of the laws of Pigul, which is laws that when the Cohen in the Holy Temple brings an offering, there is a specific time that you have to eat the offering, the person who brings the offering. Some offerings, the person also eats from the offering. So if you have a thought why you bring the offering, or why you sprinkle the blood, that this should be, that it would be eaten in a different time, then it disqualifies the korban, the offering. And there is a lot of details in those laws, and those details are most likely will never ever happen. So when you have such a mitzvah that will never ever happen, how exactly are you supposed to elevate the sparks of those mitzvahs negative urge never happens. So where's the negative energy that you need to elevate? The godly sparks that makes it happen. This is what the Alter Rebbe is going to discuss in this chapter, in this essay number 5. And that is that everything has not only the energy here in this world, but is the root in the higher worlds, which is the source of the urge that comes here. In other words, everything that comes in this world is not the first stop. There is a source for the act. Everything has a source. Every idea, every concept, every urge, every object, everything has a spiritual source that in the spiritual world, it exists before it comes to this world. So even though this scenario will never happen in this physical world, but it still exists in the higher spiritual world. And when you study the Torah, and when you study it in a proper way, the studying of the Torah in a proper way draws down holiness, Kedusha, in this source of this particular mitzvah, or particular scenario, or particular object. You bring down the holiness into it. Now, when the holiness exists, the negativity cannot exist. In other words, when there is an intense light, it is a disinfectant. When you have a holiness, the negative forces don't have the ability to cleave to such intense holiness. And this is what happens when you study the Torah. Even those laws that are absolutely never will happen in reality, but in the source it does happen. And when you study the Torah, you bring and you refine the godly sparks within the source. This is what Alter Rebbe, I basically summarized this chapter, and we're going to see it now inside to read the way the Alter Rebbe says it, and we'll be able to understand it better. Zog the Alter Rebbe, ולהבין and to understand, פרטי ההלכה is the shchiche klal, to understand that certain laws that never occur at all, ואפשר שלא יהיו במציאות, and it's possible that never actually existed, ומכל שכן שלא יהיו לעשות לבד, and certainly that they will not come to pass in the time to come. כמוי פרטי דיני פיגול וכאי גבנה. For example, the details of the laws of pigul that we just explained, when you have the improper thoughts when you offer a sacrifice. Ukai Gavnan, similarly. Hine moida zois. Says the Alter Rebbe, it is known shekol isur sheba oilam yesh loi shoresh u'makir chayim beklipos. Every prohibited thing in this world has a source and a root of life in the klipos. The klipos is the shell, the negative places. Shem loiken loyoya yachal liyas b'metzias ba'olam. Otherwise, it could not exist in this world. Bilti ashpaya liyayna. Without the flow from above. Anything has to have a spiritual source. And it says the negativity is not necessarily only a clear prohibition, but even sometimes there are certain things that are not pure godly. For example, it brings an example when one curls the hair. What does that mean, one curls the hair? You know, women are supposed to beautify themselves for their husbands and, to look nice. But when a man does that, it says in the Zohar, it's a negative thing. You're not supposed to be so much, into yourself because it's a selfish thing. Is it a clear prohibition? No. But it has a negative thing to it when the person is really involved. And in fact, it says about Yosef HaTzadik, although we don't understand the things of Yosef, but when he was in Egypt, he was a good-looking man. And it says he was mesalsel beisare, he was curling his hair. And Hashem says, your father is mourning you and you're curling your hair. And because of that, he had the temptation of the wife of Potiphar. So even such a minor thing like curling the hair also has a source in the evil chambers. It says, even when one crinkles his hair and the like receives his life force at that moment from the spiritual chambers of the klipos. As it says in the Zohar. And therefore, it says, Gam proteyo isurim sheloi bo lidei maise meyolam ba'olam hazeh agashmi. Therefore, even the particular prohibitions that never become practical issues in this physical world, mikol makoim, nevertheless, shoroshei chayusam ein b'metzius bepoyel mamish beicholos haklipos. Still, it says the roots of their life force do actually exist in the spiritual chambers of the klipos, of their shells. Meaning the negativity, the world of the negativity. It's there in the root, the life force is there. Even the particular instances that are possibly will never did or never will actually occur. For example, it brings another example of things which is very unlikely that will happen. When a person makes a mistake and he does things unintentionally. For example, when he calls by mistake the 9th, he calls it the 10th. What are we talking about? There's the laws of Maisa Behema. When you give the Maisa, the 10th, the tithing of the animals. There's a mitzvah you have to, from the animals, you have to give the 10% from the animals, you have to give an offering. So how do you do it? So the way it was done, they would have a very narrow path and the animals would pass by and they will count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as they go out. And the 10th one they put with a red mark. This is the 10th one, they call it the 10th. So by the way, there was a Rav in Kfar Chabad, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Cohen, very smart Jew. He was once talking to a wealthy person. He tried to make him to make a donation for an important cause, and the person was not so interested. So he told them about this mitzvah of the laws of bringing the 10 animals and counting. So he says, why does the Torah say to do it that way? You have to count all the animals, then the 10th one you give to Maisa. Because the Torah wants to teach you, see, this is 1 animal belongs to you, 2 is yours, 3 is yours, 4 is yours, all the way you have 9 yours, then 1 go to God. When you realize that everything goes to you, it makes you a little easier that the 10th one should go to God. But in any case, so this is the laws of the Maisa Behema, the laws of the animals. When you have the animals and you make a mistake, and instead of calling the 9th one 9, you call them the 10th. So that also, it's not the way it's supposed to be. But it's a mistake. Even if it's a mistake, it comes from the negative world. But this is something that is, you didn't even intend, and it's impossible to do it intentionally. Nevertheless, it says, the kind of eventuality that cannot be deliberate, you cannot do it intentionally, and thereby cause a klipa to light upon it. It is possible, says the Alter Rebbe, that in these circumstances, it does not exist in the chamber of klipos. He says it's possible. So actually here, there is a note from the Alter Rebbe's grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, the 3rd Chabad Rebbe, and he says, what does it mean that he says it's possible? He says, because when a person does something unintentional, the roots of it is not from the total impure chambers, But it comes from a place, the roots of it is from a place which is called klipas noiga. It is the neutral chamber that can be good and can be not good. So that's what it says. It says, a note from the Tzemach Tzedek of blessed memory. It appears to me that the Alter Rebbe used the words possibly implying uncertainty. Why? Because unwitting errors derive from noiga, not from the all total impure chambers. Therefore, it is possible that they have a place in the roots of chambers of noiga. However, and in any case, is the Rebbe. Al kol panim yeshnom b'metzius. No matter what, even those instances, those things that will not happen, nevertheless, they do exist. They don't exist in this world, but they do exist in the higher worlds. Yeshnom b'metzius. In any event, it does exist. Lahavdil b'chochma ilo shenishpashto b'efrat zel Moshe Rabbeinu. So he says, at least, if not in the klippus, at least in keeping in mind the distinction between the sacred and the profane, it says it exists in the supreme wisdom that issued and descended in this detail to Moshe at Sinai. Every detail, every possibility was given to Moshe Rabbeinu on the Mount Sinai. Kemaima, as it is the expression, Kol Mashe Talmud Vosik Osid Achadish Chulu. Whatever teaching any seasoned student will one day innovate was taught to Moshe Rabbeinu on the Mount Sinai. V'chol protei abayis de Rabbi Yirmiyah, and likewise all the details, the queries of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Who was Rabbi Yirmiyah? The Talmud tells us a story, but and that it was in the time of the Talmud, was Rabbi Yirmiyah was this kind of student that would ask such questions, and very, very weird questions, to the point that they sent them out of the yeshiva. There was one example is that they said they talked about the laws of the birds. Where does the bird go when you find a bird? Where does it come? If there is a place of a bird house. So they say the bird goes only up to 50 amos, which is about 75 feet from its bird house. So Rabbi Yirmiyah asks, okay, but what if the bird is standing on one foot in the 50 amos and the other foot in the other? All kind of questions like this. And by the way, many of the questions that he asked, the Gemara came and said, Teiku, there's no answer for this. We have to find an answer. So they sent them out of the Beis Medrash. They sent them out of the yeshiva. No, we don't want you here. Finally, it was some difficult questions that they couldn't figure out, and they went and they asked Rabbi Yirmiyah, and he gave them the answer, and then they brought them back to the yeshiva. In any case, so he says, even questions like that of Rabbi Yirmiyah, that it's possible and never will ever happen. The chulin is another case. In detail, if she wrapped him in chulin, talking about over there, talks about the laws of a firstborn animal. What if a firstborn animal came out of the womb but didn't touch the womb? How is it possible? So they say if it was wrapped, meaning the person who made it give birth wrapped it completely with something before he came out the womb, is it considered a firstborn? And possibilities like this will never ever happen. But still the Torah talks about it. Why? Says the Alter Rebbe continues, because the extension of the supreme wisdom that is vested in the laws of the Torah is infinite. Since the infinite is actually clothed in it. So that means that the wisdom of Hashem is there. Every particular details of the law is a gate drawn from the supreme wisdom, the Yosad Batem Elubashba, which founded the daughter, which is Malchus, and clothed in it. From there, it draws down and goes down to the lower worlds, the worlds of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. Now this is important to understand, says the Alter Rebbe. We know it is known, Ki Yenikas HaKlipos Me'achoraim, the Yud, Sfiros, the Kedusha. Where does the klipos, the evil side, where do they have the nourishment? Where do they gain their existence from? From the hinder part, from the 10 spheres of the holiness. Meaning, when there is the 10 attributes of holiness, there is the achoraim, the backside, which is not as intense holiness. There, in the achoraim, there is enough holiness and enough energy for this, for the klipos, for the shells, the evil, to be able to nourish and to get the sustenance. Specifically, more precisely, from the garments of the 10 spheros, the 10 attributes of the world of Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya. And yet more precisely, they derive their nurture from the garments of Yetzira and Asiya that are intermingled with klipos. So the evil of the klipos in the world of Yetzira and Asiya is intermingled with good. World of Atzilus is completely good. But in Yetzira and Asiya, you have intermingled a little not good. Kenoida, as it is known, that their nurture derives from the state of garments. Now, so we need to refine, meaning we need to disconnect their source of nourishment. How do you disconnect the source of the nourishment of the evil? When you bring in the intense holiness, and that is a disinfectant, so to speak. So he says, when you study these halachas, these laws, in speech and thought, they become separated and distinct from the sacred, from the holiness. As it is stated in Tikkunim Rai Me'imni, that's part in the Zohar, to separate the klipos from the holiness through Torah study. Vehainu, what does that mean? It says, it says, the Gemara says, why was the Yerushalayim destroyed? Because they didn't bless when they were studying Torah. They didn't make the bracha. What does that mean in the spiritual sense? Bracha means drawing down. Bracha means drawing down the holiness in the Torah. When a Jew studies Torah in the proper way, he draws down the holiness in the Torah. It is, this separation is effected by drawing down the infinite light into the supreme wisdom clothed in them in the laws of the Torah. Through Chachma, they are sorted out through the infinite light that is within them, within the Torah. Now this light is drawn into the supreme wisdom by the supernal likeness of man. When a Jew studies Torah down here in this world, there is also his likeness, his source also is studying in the spiritual world. In its source in Nukva, the feminine part of Zah, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, the three lower worlds. Now we understand that, says the Alter Rebbe, Yuvan, Chiyuv, Kol Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Le'ashlim, Kol HaTaryag. Now we understand that the requirement of every Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, every Jewish person, every soul, every three parts of the soul, to fulfill all 613 commandments, as we learned in the previous chapters, that there are certain mitzvahs that the king does for everybody, but other mitzvahs, every person has to come down again and again into this world to fulfill all the mitzvahs, but machshava dibur ma'aseh, in thought, speech, and action. Shem pratei halachos, which are the details of the laws. That's why it's important also the details of all the laws, even laws that will never happen into this. The neshamas need to come down into reincarnation, to fulfill the Torah in all of its parts, the simple meaning, the illusion, and the homiletics and secrets. In order to sort out and to refine all that pertains to them from among the 288 sparks, as we said before, the godly sparks that fell, that we need to elevate, that constitute the complete structure of man. Taryag, Pchines, Klolius, and Proteus, which are with 613 categories, general and particular. This happens now, but in the future, when Mashiach comes, the refinement will be fulfilled by studying the Torah in a form of only doing positive. We're not going to need to refine anymore because there will be no evil. So the purpose of the learning will be to elevate the nefesh, the ruach, the neshama, the three levels of the soul, higher and higher and higher to in an infinitely higher. And also the negative commandments that we'll do. So we elevate the source, the roots of the 365 negative commandments to their roots, which is holy kivuris, ulam tikkun bechasadim, and to sweeten them through the chasadim, through the kindness, beramach mitzvahs asel al kol olam yachad, with the 248 positive commandments, and to combine them together, to fuse them together. Valkain, and therefore concludes the Alter Rebbe this essay, Torah kula nitzchis bichlalo biprata. This is the entire Torah is thus eternal in general and in details. Shegam protei ha'alocha is deshasa lo yisaseh, that even the details of the laws of the 365 negative commandments, hein anofim ha'klalos. They are branches of the Torah's general statements. And all of them have a root above, the kedusha, in the 5 holy attributes of severity, just as the 365 prohibitions themselves, as they are above in the state of blood, because the 365, they correspond to 365 veins that carries and protects the blood not to go in the wrong places, that animates the organs of the vessels of Zah. This is the end of today's shir. Thank you for joining. And again, come back every day, 9 o'clock, and subscribe and share this. And once again, we have the Chitas, the Chumash Tilim Tanya in the link to be able to fulfill all of the daily studies. Any questions? Now's the time.